Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
Oh, hello girls. You're gorgeous. You are. I think you could be my first photograph of the day. Oh, look at your calves too. Oh, a white, a brown, a tan, a black. And there's another one there. It's a fawn coloured. Let me get, for my first frame of the walk, a picture of you. It is actually a path I could go in, but I'm not going to, because just beyond you, that is an unmistakable bull that is most certainly giving me the eye. So we'll stay a safe distance. The problem is here, I'm not sure if I can isolate. What you don't want is sort of one end of one cow sticking out the frame, and that sort of. I think I might just be able to manage it. 1500 shutter speed f2, 160 ISO. It's a sort of picture of serenity, sort of. We're just sitting here eating grass. We're not going to get up, if you don't mind. What does it mean when cows lie down in the morning? Does that mean we're on for a rainy day? Or don't know. I don't work for the Met Office. Well, it's Jubilee Bank Holiday on the day this is broadcast. If you're picking this up on the day it's intended to be listened to, Queen Elizabeth II celebrating 70 years on the throne.
The Forward.
I feel I should have really started with making a picture of someone today, and not so street, given where I'm walking. Street portrait of sorts, like the one I tried to get with Captain of the Canal last week. Do you remember that one, when I asked if I could make his portrait? And he said, well, he didn't say no, or no thanks, but the sort of slightly stranger reply of, I don't think you should, which led my mind to wonder all kinds of interesting stories about why I shouldn't. Was he on the run? Was he like a grey-bearded, romanticised notion of a 17th century pirate, only on a 3-mile-an-hour barge in 2022? Where was his parrot? A mighty gaggle of rum-toting seafarers. But I've started with a cow, which, or cows, which seems sort of like I'm cheating in some respects. I meet all manner of interesting folk as I make my walks, and actually I stop and talk to a fair few. I mean, last week there was the woman who'd not long come back from living in East Africa with her husband of, I think it was about 40 years. A properly lived-in glint of an eye, just waiting to regale me with amazing stories, and her rescue dog, Pip. And the reason we spoke? Just because I said good morning. Why, Neil, then? Why didn't you make a portrait? I don't know. I also stopped to talk with 3 chaps a bit further along who are part of the Widowers walking meetup, and they were digging into a mighty ploughman's first thing in the morning, which I thought looked like the best brunch in the world. Nice blokes, though they didn't offer up any cheese and pickle. Perfect opportunity though for a picture. Why, Neil, then didn't you take a picture? I don't know. And I could go on. Over the last 6 months, I've met so many walkers, so many barge owners, so many runners that have stopped, so many, yeah. We get the picture, Neil. But why didn't you, yes, I don't know. But that, my friend, is, well, it's a very, very good question, isn't it? Walking in this way opens up so many opportunities as we make our photo walks to talk with people you'd never stop in the street and talk to. Walking with a dog even more so. Where's Barney today, Neil? 3rd week in a row you've not had him. I know, Sabarkalot is fast asleep. I've come out really, really early again, and he was sleeping on the bed. I know, dog owners. Neil, we've told you, don't allow the dog on the bed. It was never our plan, but he was rolled over onto his back. He had his legs in the air, and he was sleeping very soundly, and I thought, I can't wake you up. I'll take him for a walk when I get back. Promise I will. But I'm still after, well, nearly 20 years of being a professional photographer, whatever that means, a little reticent to move on to the next stage, which sounds like dating, doesn't it? Almost as nerve-wracking, of asking, can I make your portrait, please? Because I'm thinking too far forward, probably, wondering what they may say if I ask, catastrophizing even. Well, what's it for? Why? Who are you? Why me? Is it going to go on Facebook? I don't want to be on Instagram, you know. Who gets to see it? Will you sell it? Stop! Too many voices of negativity, Neil. Well, my guest, Gabrielle Matola, may well help with this subject today. She's been photographing people on the street for a long time now. We've talked to her before, quite a while back, actually. One of the tabs on her website is called Perfect Strangers, and she now runs workshops on the subject. Actually, full disclaimer, I booked myself on her 12th of June workshop in London called Making Portraits of Strangers, Fear, Confidence and Mastery. That sounds like the day for me. I'm going as a fully paid up member of the workshop, though I dare say at some stage I may just record a little sound to show you how I'm doing with it, if I'm allowed to. Now, I know that you may not necessarily think of street portraits, which can mean so many things. For me, I suppose it's in the middle of the countryside portraits. You may not think of it as something that you're going to do or maybe want to do, but there's a fascination for me to be at least armed with the confidence, because we're coming across so many interesting people all the time, aren't we? Us travelling Wilburys with a camera. So I think our conversation, our chat about photographing on the street, making portraits of people that we meet along our walks, could just be the handy nudge some of us need to understand the art, or is it a discipline, a little better.
Today on the Photowalk.
Your body language is super important, but it's generated from what you're thinking. I mean, I haven't tried this, but I wonder if you're having trouble with the mind, because this works generally, in just basic psychology. If you're having trouble with your thoughts, you can change your body, and your body will help you change your thoughts, and your mind will help you change your body. It's a relationship. It's not either or. Like if you open your stance and you stop doing something that makes you look guilty, if you change your body, maybe it will help you change your thoughts. But I find on the street it's much more powerful for me to change my thoughts.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today those stories come from Gabrielle Matola as we think about confidence on the street. Plus inspirational words too from Gulnara Samoilova on belief, and Phil Minot and being a photographer now, what it means. Plus you. It's a unique, special kind of photography podcast made from the letters you send in, the thoughts you have, the words from our special inspirational guests. Whatever you photograph with, be it a film camera, a digital camera, or even a pinhole made from your kids' Lego because they stopped playing with it a decade ago, but you never quite got it out of your system. This isn't a show that will make you feel a little lost if you don't know the history of art or photography, or think The Exposure Triangle is a 1978 movie starring John Hudson and Gloria Guida about a ship that gets lost when searching for the remains of Atlantis. It's about how we feel when we make pictures, what it does for us, what it does for others. And in that, say this figure together now, 6.6 billion people on this planet can make a picture with something. There's a lot of us about to walk with on our photo walk today. In the mailbag then, Paul in Liverpool completes his first ever photo walk. We hear about self-belief, what a holiday from social media can bring. Hegard the Dane, remember him, reminds me of a particular anniversary, the joy of small stuff, and photo walks no further from your backyard. Why photography has rescued a friend called Chaz, photographing how you feel and making ICM pictures with a smartphone. Really? Is there an app for that? Well, we'll find out soon enough. Shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Walking trousers, shorts at the moment, it's hot here. Check. Union flag underpants for the Jubilee walkers. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Memory cards or spare film. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk.
I felt I needed to splash through a small puddle here. It's been a bit rainy overnight, and this morning the field here is absolutely sodden, and the dew. Well, it feels a bit like perhaps an early autumn day. Let me get a picture And the thistle here is wonderful. Got the sort of snaps of purple in between everything else. Let me make a picture, a sketchbook image, a something and nothing. Shutter speed 100th, f5, ISO 200. There we go. I'm trying to get the dew to show there. Really, a macro at this point would be wonderful. Or we might come to that as a subject. I'm very grateful to mpb.com, a company that have so generously shown their faith and support in this project of ours. These walks that we make together, making our photographic imprint. And I know I mentioned this last week. Would you mind if I mention it again? Is it about your latest purchase from mpb.com, Neil? How did you guess? Yes, it is. And it is perfect for today's show in some respects. The conversation, at least. I bought a lens from mpb.com to pop on the front of my fixed focal length X100V camera, which I know a fair few of you are familiar with. And it's the one I often take on these walks if I'm not using the X Pro 1, of course. It's a teleconversion lens that just screws on the front really easily, and it takes my 35mm focal length, if you're using the traditional full frame lingo, to 50mm, which then makes it perfect really for street portrait work, or any sort of portrait work, and of course on par with the famous focal length many a respected street photographer across the decades has used. So thank you, mpb.com. It turned up good as new, as you said in the description, for a lot less than the actual brand new one, and I'm using it today. MPB are the people to use when it comes to buying and selling and trading used camera kit online in the UK and the US and Europe, and I'm proud that they're a part of our story here because they help photographers like me and like you to tell our stories. You'll find a link to mpb.com on the show page today. They're not really hard to remember because it is simply mpb.com. M for make, P for photographs, B for better. mpb.com. So let's see who's been writing to us in the mailbag. 2 letters to start with. And we'll begin with some feedback from last week's show. A quickish shutter burst, this letter. You might call it a 1/100th from Mark Underwood, relating back to my foreword on the show last week, talking about, once again, the lonesome 3 TV channels we had when I were a lad, as my friend Mally from the North would say. And just so our internationally flavoured other listener understands, in case you missed last week's episode, in the UK we had BBC One, BBC Two and ITV, and that was it. No other telly. There was a 4th button that TVs came with in the UK, but the man from television, was it Television Rentals, had no more idea than anybody else about what that button was for. Well, there's a memory. A man coming around to set up your telly. And I'm sorry, it was usually a man, wasn't it? We had Uncle Mike. I did always wonder why he was my Uncle Mike. But let's move on. Anyway, from Mark Underwood, BBC Two, Neil. BBC Two, whoa. You are very young. I remember BBC and ITV, plus in radio terms, the Home Light and Third channels. See, we had almost as little radio. If you wanted something more modern, you had to go to Radio Luxembourg. Mark, you are now officially in the Grand Master of Life pile of letters that I keep on the desk. I still have an uneasy relationship with needing a faster car pile, which is not a very large one for this show. Then there's the old enough to remember cassette players in the car pile. And why is there more hair in my ear than on my head pile? Mainly for men, that one. And then your pile. Can you imagine telling somebody in 19 Bibbly What's It that one day you'd be able to hear podcasts on anything imaginable, including, and I looked this up, the Dental Hacks podcast, which introduces you to the delights of a stranger's dental hygiene. Oh, there's a show for us. Anyway, Mark, thank you very much. And here's one from Paul Martin, a letter all about, well, just doing it, getting started, facing the fear, which is pertinent, very much so, to today's show. There are some pictures to go with this letter, which I will pop on the show page. Do make sure you go and see the show page that I prepare each week. It has links, often links of what's been discussed by the photographers I talk to as well. And there'll be a link to see Paul's pictures and more of his work too. Hi Neil, writes Paul. And after listening to your podcast for a while now, unfortunately not on a single photo walk, but mostly pottering around the house or on my daily commute, I've actually completed what I would consider my first photo walk. Get me! Although I was with a friend, so if you don't mind, I didn't listen to your podcast whilst walking, but large steps. It was a day of firsts, as I was also trying my hand for the first time at street photography. Obviously, the first time nerves set in, and the anxiousness and feeling completely exposed as I walked around my home city of Liverpool with my Canon 6D in my hand was immense. My friend even had to ask, well, are you going to get your camera out or what? As we walked down the first street with my camera still safely tucked in my bag. But once that first frame was made, my head was swiveling around looking for pictures to make everywhere, and I began running around quickly to zoom with my feet as I was relying solely upon my nifty 50 to make the pictures. For my other listener, by the way, who isn't so aware of why it's called the nifty 50, I've left a link on the show page from a website called Expert Photography, which I think you'll like. Just in case you're a smartphone shooter who is thinking, nifty Watfy? Oh, the planes are up early this morning. Where are you? We have a bit of a problem in the UK. Well, this week we've had a problem, not with these sort of light aircraft, with the airliners. Lots of flights cancelled. Oh, the mist is coming. Is it the morning mist? It's coming across the fields now. Wonderful. Oh, a little bit more of that, please. That'll make a super picture. Thank you, Paul Martin. P.S. He says, I know you asked for Instagram, so mine is 4_4 the word. So 4_4 the word _adventure. I'll put the link on the show page today. Not a photography Instagram as such, but some pictures documenting the adventures of myself and my family. A work in progress, but an excuse to get out and explore. And that's what it's for, isn't it? You don't have to have a deeply photographic grid, just a chance to get out and explore by yourself or with your family. Paul, I shall leave a link, as I say, on the show page with 9 pictures that I've selected to show from your very first photo walk. Love the one at the top. A real sign of the times picture involving the machine I'm looking forward to seeing as an antique in museums. What machine would that be, Neil? Or you'll have to go and see the show page. You tease. Right, fancy some inspiration? And Paul, this is, I suppose really this one is for you, though my other listener may well enjoy it too. Would you like to hear it? Yes, please, I think I might. It's a story clip from episode 224 when I spoke to Gulnara Samoilova, who founded the movement, Women Street Photographers, in New York, although it's actually a very international thing, of course, now. And Gulnara went on a workshop, the last one, run by the late and brilliant photographer Mary Ellen Mark, the much celebrated American photojournalist. And on that workshop, Mary gave her some advice, which is the impetus that Gulnara needed to believe in her work and her photography and her idea to make a movement called Women Street Photographers. So let's hear from Gulnara about that encouragement received that's been so important to her, not just as a photographer, I think, but as a person.
Every person, I assume, goes through a period of time where they have doubts in their self-confidence, or if they're, question their photography abilities, or, so I was going through the same things, my confidence wasn't as strong, and receiving that letter was transformational for me, because she assured me that I should continue, that I have talent, I have the ability, and I should focus on something that I've been passionate for almost 40 years. So it's really, really changed my life and gave me the strength and motivation to do what I'm doing. And when I curated my first exhibition, Women Street Photographers, in New York City in 2018, I dedicated that exhibition to the memory of Mary Ellen Mark.
Wow.
And I have a printout of that letter, which, hang, like I read that letter all the time. So I folded that letter and put it in the pocket during the opening. And I was so proud of what I did, that I put together work of 75 women photographers. And I had that letter in the pocket. And I knew that she would be so proud of me as well. It just makes me so emotional.
Golnara Samoilova. And I will link to her episode on the show page today. My guest shortly, who is Gabrielle Matola. We are talking street photography and confidence today, but I think a lot of the things that we discuss affect photography generally at the moment on all sorts of levels. If you'd like to send your stories and pictures in, I would love to receive them. The email address is studio@photographydaily.show, studio@photographydaily.show. Now, if you're sending pictures in, please, if you can make them 2,000 pixels wide, that would be excellent. If you are sending from your smartphone, then just send them best quality, and try to instruct your whatever email software that you use not to squish and squash your pictures. We've had a few recently where the email has said, "Oh, it's a picture you want to send. All right, I'll make it the size of a postage stamp for you," which is okay if you want to just view them when they're being sent backwards and forwards, but to put them on a show page, bit trickier. So 2,000 pixels or best quality, please, and do remember to pop a link on there to your Instagram or your website or your Flickr, something like that, so that I can link it back to your website as well, which I know Uncle Google likes very much indeed. And if you have sent in an email before and you think, oh, it's all right, Neil will remember, please, it does really help if you can just send me your link every single time. I know there are some of you that I know very well now, and your links should be imprinted on this little mind of mine, but it doesn't always work that way. So please help me out that way. Here's a letter from Chris Rogalski with again some pictures which will be on the show page today for you, and again some apposite words, really, considering that whilst we may be talking about street with my guest Gabrielle today, some of the disciplines of street carry over into all kinds of photographic thoughts. Hey Neil, Chris here, Chris Rogalski. Normally I post something to the Photography Daily Facebook group. However, I've committed myself to get off Facebook for a month or so while I gain traction back on my photography journey. Social holidays, Facebook holidays. Yes, and that's a subject actually for, I've got somebody in mind that we're going to talk to about holidays from social media, not in a political or bad sense, just anyway, not too much of a spoiler. It's coming up shortly. Interestingly, as I listen to shows, I'm listening to Valerie Jardin talking about posting on social, talking about street photography, which has hit me in a place I didn't quite expect. I may not do street, but as one of your guests said, street doesn't mean necessarily a cityscape. Myself, I'm most definitely a documentary style photographer, and I feel that comes with an air of easy mixed with an air of difficulty, as in reality it's a world where, as Valerie says, you have mere fractions of a second to get just one moment in history. So long story short, in terms of social media, I found myself starting to post just for posting's sake and doing it for the likes and other what I'd consider selfish reasons. So I took a break for my own mental health so that I can focus on the 3 R's: reset, relax, and refocus. Taking time away so that I can focus on building my new photo business in a new way that just isn't social media based. Spending less time on the socials and getting things done feels great. All the photographs I've sent her from Green Bay, Wisconsin, USA. And marvellous they are too. On the show page, of course, they will be, with a link to more of your work as well. So thank you, Chris. And as I say, that idea of a holiday away from social, relaxing on the beach with a notepad, as you might call it, we're going to cover that in the show shortly. So I think it's time to meet our guest this week. Now, I've spoken with Gabrielle Mottola before on the show, as I say, and of course from time to time I've used clips from our chats to share inspiration between our walking. Interestingly, and I read this, I didn't realise, and I forgot to mention it during our chat, Gabrielle, but or did I mention it? Did I mention your relationship with women street photographers? Oh, Neil, have you forgotten? I think I may have done. Anyway, she was a finalist in Gulnara Samoilova's Women's Street Photography Festival, and of course there's a link to who you heard a moment ago. Today I want to take a moment to talk about confidence, because confidence is really important for photography. Not just technical confidence, but social confidence. And I want to mention a workshop that I didn't know at the time of recording that I would be able to attend. But I am now. That workshop being Making Portraits of Strangers, Fear, Confidence and Mastery. So yes, we'll talk a little about that, but moreover we'll talk today about the changing face of street photography, the confidence to make portraits of strangers, and a little of the, I suppose it's the philosophy of the aura we can put out as photographers, good, bad or indifferent. And I know this is important. I'm probably myself overtly self-conscious when I'm trying my hand at street photography and street portraits in particular. But this self-consciousness is a really important facet that we'll be talking about when making any pictures. So this is Gabrielle Mottola, part one of our conversation today.
The changing face of street photography over the last 2 years, Gabrielle. Well, that could be a whole essay in itself. How would you describe the changes where we are today, in the UK at least, because that's what you have experience of mainly?
There was a point at which we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it was people were much more hesitant to approach each other. I mean, at that phase, if you remember back in lockdown, like when we would go out for our hour exercise and people were like avoiding each other and pinging off into opposite directions.
Well, and that's exactly what I mean. I mean, I remember walking the towpath locally to here. People would literally fling themselves into a hedge.
I don't think it's lasting. I think we've kind of gone back to where we were before, if not maybe more appreciative of each other to some extent. And I mean, I've changed. I've become much more confident and comfortable in my street photography. And certainly I think I did appreciate people before the pandemic, and maybe even more so now, my connections with people.
Your 4th Street workshop, mere days away as this goes out, and this is a good time to promote that. And if it is full, by the way, when we air, at least lay the foundations for another and another and another after that. I am aware, of course, that we have an international audience. This will appeal to in proximity terms. But there's a wider story behind it. Firstly, though, let's do the plug. Let's do the dates and the times and the logistics and the stuff.
Okay, so I'm running the next one June 11th. And if it is filled up, I'm going to open up one on June 12th.
Yeah.
And it's 6 people maximum. We're gathering in central London, and we will sit down and have a discussion, get to know each other a little bit about, our photography, where we are, what our fears are, how we're feeling about the day. And then I go out with people and I demonstrate what I do. I do what I do. Yeah. And they get a chance to observe that. And when they're feeling ready, we break into groups of 2s and they go off and I spend time with each pair. And then when we're ready, we break up into individuals and we go off and we do our thing and we come back and we discuss what's happened, what came up. And that's what we're working on during the workshop. That's what I've been working on, the fear of the unknown. So it's kind of 2 things. It's the self-talk that we experience. So what we think might happen. Will this person give consent? Will this person not give consent? Or in the case of street photography, will this person get angry and aggress me? Or will I, quote, get away with it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of hip shooting and surreptitious photography that happens in street photography, which has its advantages. So I guess the fears plural with the street portraits specifically is fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, And yeah, I think those are probably the two main ones.
And the ratio is something that in our communication with each other that you mentioned, that you noticed, and what you've been presenting as workshops is 3-to-1 men. I mean, there is history perhaps behind this number, but there are more women street photographers than ever. And you have popular movements, which I know you're involved with as well, like Gulnara Samoilova's Women Street Photographers, based out of New York, but it is an international thing. Did the 3-to-1 attendance surprise you?
A little bit, but not tremendously. It's historical that the photography industry was male-dominated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changing. And I find it's actually healthier when there's a mixture, because then we get to talk about gender imbalances and gender projections and the idea of gender and how that relates to photography. Because a question that comes up a lot from male participants is, don't you find it, and also just generally, I've been asked this question over years, don't you find it easier to photograph as a woman than I might as a man? Because, you know, around the issues of trust, particularly when it comes to women and children.
Yeah.
So we discussed that. And to that question, I would say no. But I would say that it's really all in the approach and the intention, and to focus on why you're doing this and to forget and leave the baggage behind you. It's not yours. It's something that's projected onto you by society. Don't carry it. Don't identify with it. And I've talked to, actually I was talking to a photographer, John Walmsley, the other day, and he was saying that he's actually been in situations where he has an easier time, he thinks, than some women do. And it is very much it can level the playing field, I think. It's an interesting space to walk into and to talk about and deal with these questions of gender.
Well, let's take this a step further, since we've so briskly brought the gender debate to the front of the queue of questions. I noted some feedback on your workshops from a male attendee who felt he was in a place where approaching women or children for a portrait had brought him to, well, a place of fear, because they may think his motives are in some way impure. And I too, Gabrielle, have the same fear in some ways when I photograph at events and weddings where you know, I'm expected to be making pictures of everyone and anyone, but maybe it's a media-driven thing. I've noticed that awkward dilemma. Do you think I'm overthinking it, or is that what men in particular seem to be noticing when photographing on the street?
No, I think that's accurate, and it's not. Anyway, I always embrace the awkward, because street photography can get really awkward,
Yeah.
like especially street with portraiture. Just I always say, just like embrace the awkward. Let's just go right into it. No, I think that's right. I think the presentation of males in society, in the media particularly, is I think men do have to deal with that more. They're carrying the weight of all the bad behavior of all men on their shoulders. And I think there's this thing, this, I don't remember where I read this, but it's a great turn of phrase that, you know, so most offenders are male, but most males don't offend. And I think that you said the word self-consciousness, and that is, it is the big word really that we're dealing with when it comes to being on the street. And the more self-conscious you are, the more attention you draw to yourself.
Yeah.
And the more uncomfortable you are, the more you project that outwardly, and the more people react to that. We're animals. We're very good at picking up on these cues. You know, our bodies sense danger far before our brains have a chance to, our minds have a chance to engage with it. So I think your physicality is really influenced by your thinking. And I mean, you would benefit from coming on this course, because I think it would really help you with the way that you feel when you're at weddings when it comes to children. Again, I would say to you, focus on your intention, your kindness, your respect, and don't identify with that. And it is a problem. I mean, the way that the UK, specifically England, reacts to or thinks about children is media driven, and they're so quick to jump to the dark thoughts. I've not experienced it as badly in any other country as I have here. And I do think that's a problem. That's not good for children.
No.
I understand that it's rooted in wanting to protect children, but I think it could be in danger of doing the very opposite, isolating them, you know.
Well, one thing that I did read that you'd noted was that if you ask a parent for permission to photograph a child, they'll often say, well, why don't you ask the child?
Yeah, or just insist that you ask them, which is great, because the child, that suggests that the parent really recognizes that child's autonomy, which is important. it's an important part of development. Otherwise, like what happens? Like you're under the control of your parents until you're 18 and then you're free to go. Yeah. You have no practice with that. So I think it's great.
And how do you deal with questions from those you photograph with regard to social media? Where's it going to be used? What's it for? Where will it be seen? That sort of thing. How do you find people in that respect?
They're curious, like 9 times out of 10. They're just curious.
Yeah.
When they ask me, I'm honest. If it's great, I will share it. It might make, I'll share it on Instagram. It will go onto Facebook and Twitter because I have TTT running and it does that automatically. Yeah. And it might go on my website. Eventually it might be an exhibition or a book. But what it won't do is it won't be going on a billboard advertising anything because legally we don't have the right to do that.
No.
I think as far as the concern that some parents and family has, to each his own. Everybody's got to move at their own speed and their own comfort level.
There will, of course, inevitably be those who are a little confused by our intentions. And I just wonder how to allay those fears, Gabrielle, if indeed you really can. If somebody sees the internet, for example, as the work of the devil, I guess that's the way they'll always feel.
Well, we have a negativity bias as humans anyway, right? So it's the crash on the freeway. We stop to look. And our news media tends to, not entirely, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater by any means, but it tends to focus on negative stories.
Yeah.
And certainly the algorithms, do focus on negative stories, negative attention. But it blows things out of proportion because relative to what actually happens in the world, we don't get a lot of positive stories. We get all the negative ones. And so in our minds, we create this reality out of the unknown and out of the unverified and out of experience that isn't ours. We make up stories in our head. So when it comes to pictures of families and children on the internet, we're thinking through a story and a scenario that we want to avoid. But is that real? Certainly it comes into focus in the street. Like you're thinking through this, and as you're walking around, you see somebody you'd like to photograph, and you start telling yourself a story about that person, about the right to do it, about this, about that, about, your head won't stop talking to you. And so that is, again, based on presumption, where our minds are prediction machines. It's completely natural. When it comes to mental well-being, this is where the work comes in with meditation and other techniques to understand that you're never really going to stop that chatter, but you can change your relationship to it. And that's what has to happen, for example, with you when you have those thoughts when you're at a wedding. They may never stop, but you can change your relationship to them.
And in fact, I make a lens choice upon that decision as well. I think, I won't dare put a 70 to 200 millimeter on this. This is going to make me look really creepy.
Well, again, yeah. There are realities to you. It's not all in your mind, certainly in the sense that we do live in a culture. We live in an environment where these issues are real, they're raised. And I certainly, as far as lens choices go, tend to choose. That's why I choose 50 or 35, because I want to be in the space with somebody. 35 is my street photography choice. Like if I'm going to be making candid street images, I'll use a 35. Yeah. And if I'm going to be making street portraits, I use a 50 most of the time because of the distance. But I think that the same techniques and ability to change your relationship to that kind of thinking apply. Because are you really being creepy with a 70 to 200?
No, not my intention, no.
You got to shut the creepy thoughts down or at least thank them for trying to help. But you understand they're trying to help, but they're not really being very helpful.
And actually, on a similar vein, in a similar vein now, and you've made me remember something that I saw on a workshop that I went on, and it's all about how we act as photographers, and the message that we're putting out through what we're doing with our body, how we are perceived, and how we are read by those that are coming into our focus, as it were, with our camera. I watched somebody working off the hip, and I don't think I've ever seen somebody look so guilty.
Again, I think if you go into that, it's really more about the intention and why you're doing it. Like if you're shooting from the hip because you're trying not to be noticed, or you more importantly, if you feel guilty.
Yeah, he looked guilty.
You see right there, you can pick it up. You can read that.
Yes, I read it.
Right. Well, people read that. So, your body language is super important, but it's generated from what you're thinking. I haven't tried this, but I wonder if you're having trouble with the mind, because this works generally, in just basic psychology. If you're having trouble with your thoughts, you can change your body. And your body will help you change your thoughts, and your mind will help you change your body. Like, it's a relationship. It's not either or. Like, if you open your stance and you stop doing something that makes you look guilty, if you change your body, maybe it will help you change your thoughts. But I find on the street, it's much more powerful for me to change my thoughts and let the body follow. I think it's how you raise the camera. If you raise the camera with the same amount of guilt, I think people would pick that up too. It's really a mind game. And I talk about this with students a lot, and just generally think of it this way, that photography, the changes you're looking for in your photography really don't happen with the camera significantly. They happen between your ears and between your shoulder blades, with your mind and your heart, and what's going on there, what you feel and what you think, and how that's all related to how you see. And that really changes your pictures. Certainly the technical aspects of it change, but it's like thinking of a surgeon. Sure, like a 10 blade, it's like you're going to go for that to open. I've been watching a lot of Grey's Anatomy. It's a very good companion for having, over the lockdown. You're gonna choose a tool, but how much does it really have to do with the knowledge that you bring to that tool? Yeah. It's important, but it's not everything, and it's not even close to everything. So I've watched my photography improve, I think, dramatically through this work that I've been doing, and you mentioned at the beginning that I have most experience in street photography, or it's actually something that's only a few years old, really, for me. I'm very firmly rooted educationally in street photography,
yes,
but really portraiture is where most of my experience came from, and documentary work, and a lot of landscapes since 2013 when I first started going to Iceland. I really only started doing street portraiture consciously and making an effort to work my way through my self-consciousness and fears of rejection and other things about 2018, 2019.
And let's nail down what street portraiture is. Because is street portraiture where you're asking for permission to make a picture of somebody? Or is street portraiture where you see somebody that looks interesting, where you make a picture, but they have no association with you in terms of conversation?
I think for me, I would say the first, because it's about the relationship.
It's a transaction then?
I wouldn't call it transaction, but it's a relationship between myself and the person being photographed that's important. It's the connection. And what I'm looking for in the picture is that connection, more than the framing, more than the composition, more than the exposure even sometimes. It's really important to have that connection, and that comes out of a relationship.
Yeah.
As brief or as long as it can be. Some of these portraits are a few seconds, and some are a few minutes, and sometimes longer. But for me, it's more about the interaction I have with the person. The photography is almost a souvenir. It's important, and I love doing it. I love making pictures.
And I'll return to Gabrielle for part 2 of our conversation very shortly. Like many indie podcasters, to support the show, we have a Patreon page where some very special friends help support this show for the price of a cup of high street coffee or roll of HP5 black and white film a month. And now, if you feel a bit squeamish about monthly payments, you can actually join our podcast annually. And that started in the last 7 days, actually. Our Patreon friends help support the time it takes to make and sustain these shows and build a future for the podcast. Without you, we simply, and I mean this, we simply would not be here. You are that integral to it. And to say thank you, I make an additional short diary of a photographer show each week, which you can only hear on the Patreon webpage or the wonderful app on the smartphone, which has been updated recently with all sorts of new features. And Judith McDermott, one of our patrons, has written in response to the episode 91 of More, which was a show called Monsieur Cartier-Bresson's iPhone. Intriguing, I know, for all sorts of reasons. Neil, after just listening to the More show, where Mike Koos discussed mobile phone photography, I thought I'd share an image I created with my iPhone 13 mini yesterday. Yeah, I thought, Judith, it would make an interesting More show, considering just how many photographers, like you, like me, have a relationship with our smartphones. As much as as much as our in inverted commas, bigger cameras. And I'll pop your pictures on the show page today because I absolutely love them. They tap into that thing that I was talking about, which is within the interview with Mike Koos on that show. which is looking for apps where you can treat your smartphone in the same way a more traditional camera, i.e. control your settings like shutter speed and aperture and so on. Judith says, I had quickly searched and downloaded an app called Slow Shutter in order to be able to accomplish this intentional camera movement look. I'd normally have used ICM with my camera, but sadly I'd left it at home because of the torrential rain we were having, so I just had my smartphone. This was taken at a jazz and blues festival at a vineyard in Grafton, Illinois, just north of St. Louis on the Mississippi River. And since they moved the show inside to a large covered pavilion tent with amazing natural light, I was really kicking myself for not having taken my camera. I'm really pleased though with the images that I did get using the app, although the resulting file size is small. I've yet to really figure out the settings on the app. I also tweaked the vibrance and made some minor curves adjustment in Snapseed, a wonderful, super inexpensive photo editing app for iPhone or Android. And there are many apps you can sort of dart in and out of. I start off in Lightroom, sometimes then throw them into Carbon. You've started with Slow Shutter, then you've moved it through Snapseed. I suppose you have to be careful how many times you reopen and save for degradation. But on the whole, I think your pictures, no, not on the whole, completely, your pictures have worked brilliantly. And they'll be on the show page today. Thank you, says Judith, for a wonderful podcast. No, thank you, Judith, and one for luck, Judith, as you'll now become known. I and my other listener will love these, I'm sure, and it's just amazing how much control you have. You've made ICM shots which look every inch the part that they've been made on a camera 4 times as large and expensive. And if you don't know what intentional camera movement photography is all about, you can check out Judith's amazing work on the show page today. And thank you for being a supporter of this podcast. And just a quick word about ICM, because it is a double-edged artistic sword. I'm going to be talking about ICM with a guest coming up who lives in Austria, where, well, she can't take street portraits or street pictures or street photography, come to that matter, in the traditional sense, because in Austria it's apparently, I don't know my Austrian law, but I'm accepting Alex's word for it, that it's illegal, that you'll soon find that you don't have many friends if you lift your camera to your eye on an Austrian street. So intentional camera movement, where you move the camera around as you press the shutter and create this motion blur so that people are not recognizable, has become I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to, fodder, perhaps the style. No, the style's a much kinder expression of street photography certainly in parts of Austria. And I think that's a bit sad, really. I think the work that ICM produces is fantastic, by the way. There's whole forums, whole websites, whole books actually dedicated to the art or the expression using your camera and ICM. But if that's how history is going to remember decades of Austria, that's the bit that I think is unfortunate, if not sad, but unfortunate. Because these are historical street photographs, aren't they? We want to be remembering what Austria looked like in 2022 as an image, not as a motion blur image. But it's a fascinating debate, and one that I'll be having with Alex. I think in a couple of weeks' time. There's a fantastic piece of work that Alex Frederickson has produced, and she's published her first book, and I thought you'd like to come along on that journey and learn all about it. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And if you'd like to join us on Patreon, then it's easy to do. Just go to the website, all the W's, photographydaily.show. Then in the top right-hand corner, see it there? Just over there. No, there. Yes, that's the one. It's the orange button, yellowy orange button, and click that button and it'll take you to all the information that you need. Right, back to our letters. It's an important day today. It's not really Jubilee Day today necessarily. If you're listening to this on the day that it was intended to be listened to, there's a series of Jubilee days, some bank holidays, additional bank holidays, Thursday and Friday bank holidays. Then the weekend. We have a street party. Well, not so much a street party, a garden party. But people in our street are coming along. And the Sunday, lots of parties being organised. I know not everybody's a royalist, but we're celebrating it for the work that she does. And I read a story the other day of somebody who'd ordered and bought a load of Jubilee mugs, only to his horror to realise that he'd made I don't know whether he made the spelling mistake, or whether, as happens when you write... Oh, hang on. I'll hold on to that story for a second. I love that. There's a shaft of light just breaking through the canopy of trees above me, and it's illuminating some fern and, large nettles. These are like super monster nettles. So you get just this dash of light in the middle of dark, which is very appropriate for an assignment that Sean Tucker set a few weeks ago. Let me get another one. 100th, F5. I'm underexposed by 3 stops, 160 ISO, underexposing just so that everything around it falls into complete darkness or complete mystery. Yes, so this chap, I don't know whether he'd made the mistake when he ordered these mugs, or whether the text corrector had marched in, corrected it, and he hadn't properly checked it before he sent it off. But he ordered 40,000, is it 40,000 mugs? I think it was 40,000 mugs that should have said Jubilee, but they said Jubilee. Congratulations for the Diamond Jubilee celebrations. And he was stuck with them. He tried to sell them. He should have sold them individually, because somebody did actually in the end buy them. He tried to sell them. First of all, nobody was interested. Then one person popped up and said, "Yeah, I'll have all those off you." And I believe he's made an absolute fortune out of the Diamond Jubilee mugs. So I can't think of Jubilee now. I just keep thinking of it as Jubilee. 96 years old, our Queen. And as you listen to this, Thomas and I are heading up to a railway called the Severn Valley, where they have a special purple painted steam loco. So we're celebrating there today. Congratulations, Your Majesty. And then, did you know as well, this is officially, did you know? Well, you're just about to tell us, Neil. Officially, our anniversary show in many ways. 2 years. 2020, established during just after the first wave of the virus that shall not be named, to now, 2022. What a journey. It's developed as a cast into our 2 main editions, of course, in the week. Those being the Photowalk and now the new assignment, a couple of months old. And then, of course, it's now on Patreon too as More and Replay. We were discussing the name of the podcast in More last week, which is part of an ongoing branding discussion. But apart from that, I think we can report that we're doing okay. I'm thoroughly enjoying my walks with you, and so grateful for the letters and the thoughts and the emotions that you share as we walk, and the bird song is our accompaniment. Certainly is today. I'm in woods. I'm walking through woods. And one of our, if not the first letter writers, was Hagar the Dane, which I know sounds like he should be a character in Asterix. So it was great to hear from Lars, who is Hagar at this juncture. Hi, Neil. Photography Daily's 2nd anniversary is here. I bought you a gift a long time ago, but I sent it late to arrive on time. Since Brexit, the continent's been cut off in terms of express shipments. Keep an eye, though, on your mailbox. I shall. Still no sign yet, but my eye is firmly peeled on the door, and so is Sir Barkalots. He's got very protective of our front door now. We don't actually have a traditional doorbell, so I'm really not quite sure where he's got the habit from. But if there is a doorbell on television, he goes absolutely, well, he just goes tonto, runs up and down, bark, bark, bark. Say, Barney, we don't have a doorbell, love. What are you barking for? It's on the telly. It's 11:15 at night. Who's going to visit now? So yeah, any doorbell, we're in trouble. But Barney, yes, he's keeping an eye on the door as well, Lars. I dare mention Brexit or politics, because I read in the show feedback recently that, quote, we were becoming too political. PD was a way to quote, PD was a way to relax while walking, and now has become a stressful listen. Oh, I was crestfallen by that. I did think of all the things I hope we aren't as we walk and get enthused about your pictures is overtly political or stressful. Maybe I know I did have some mentions of stop mentioning get off my land, which I've parked for a what I called in the PD Facebook a great free zone, because I think it was grating a few of you. Anyway, thank you, Lars. I'm keeping lookout, as I say, for said package. But we've had nothing so far. We had contact lenses for Sam, start of the week. Early birthday card for our Thomas. It's his 12th coming up. Nothing for Jack. And a bill for me from the accountants. Now that's stress. Lars says, P.S. the customs papers should be in place. It's nothing special. Just a sincere thank you from me to you. I'm still out there, still listening every week and keeping numbers on your use of the A word. Go easy on that. I will. And what does a sincere thank you mean? Should I be preparing myself for a camera that starts with the letter L? Oh, rubbing my knees now with enthusiasm. Or a month's supply of a biscuit that starts with the letter G, maybe. Either way, I'm thrilled. Here is a letter from, well, I'm just going to say a letter from Chaz. Hi, Neil, or dear Neil, should I say, keeping in the spirit of a letter that is analogue. Yes, we like our analogue lingo. I'm quite a recent new listener and have been enjoying this newfound medium for me of podcasting. That's relevant if you think about our discussion at the start of today's walk. Thank you for the tip on A Photographic Life, which along with a candid frame have been supercharging my knowledge of photographers and photography. Now next week I am going on, you'll like this, Chaz, I'm going on an actual photo walk with Grant Scott, who is the curator of the United Nations of Photography and a Photographic Life podcast, and a super brain when it comes to, I think anyway, when it comes to matters of photography and the history and the art of photography. Although he doesn't call it an art, does he? I better quickly rewind. Who is a super expert on the history of art. Yes. So we're going to go for a walk close to where he lives. He's got a couple of walks that he's suggesting. So it'll be me and thee and him. Two of us with a microphone, just talking about, I want to talk about his past, because as a photographer, he's got a rich and varied past, and so many incredible stories with celebrities, and just generally his knowledge of being a working photographer commercially for decades, and an editor, and it really is. I don't know how we're going to do. We might have to, I was going to say, I don't know how we're going to do it in one episode. I might actually think that we'll carry that across a few perhaps. So Grant Scott will be my guest in weeks to come, and I'm going on that actual photo walk with him next week. Thoroughly looking forward to that. But, Chaz. Yeah, back to Chaz. I just wanted to share my thoughts about photography, and I've answered one of the conversation starters that you have on your contact page. Yeah, good reminder. On our contact page, as Chaz says, there are some conversation starters. If you haven't written to the show before and you thought, one day I'm going to write into Neil and his other listener And you can do that really easily by emailing us studio@photographydaily.show, or you can go via the contact page on the website and email from the form in there. And in there, or on there, the contact page, you will see some questions which are not designed necessarily all to be answered, but they can be good conversation starters. So if you haven't written in before but you fancy doing so and you think, well, what shall I write about? There's a starter. There's a starter for, what do they call it? Starter for 10, starter for 1, starter for whatever for you. You asked, says Chaz, how making pictures has changed my life. Well, I'd say it's been the calm in a pretty turbulent 2 years, if that's not an understatement. There I was, like many, motoring along the highway of life each day, when somebody one day decided to close all the intersections. Without sounding too dour, it was a major life change, this pandemic. I lost my job, then sadly I lost my mother too. I must have spent half a year coming to terms with this from 2020 into 2021, a journey that took darker twists and turns than I'd ever hoped to meet again in my life. October of 2020, I picked up a camera, which was just a smartphone at first, and started to take pictures on walks that I would make with my partner. He eventually returned to his work, and I found myself on those daily walks, now alone with my thoughts, but also a new camera from Christmas. A Canon 6D. Oh, second mention for the 6D today. It's a very popular camera, isn't it? I can't say there's been a great euphoria attached to taking pictures, says Chaz, but I can say that the quietness and the stillness that you talk about, I started to experience when alone, certainly changed how I felt as I rose from my bed each day, looking forward to what had become religiously my time. How has photography changed my life? I feel free. And especially in these times that we live, that's a powerful 4-letter word. Yes, it is. Thank you, Chaz. I appreciate your letter. And of course, when you feel like the time is right, I'd love to see some of your pictures. But you keep well. And yes, enjoy those quiet times that you make with your camera. Now, from one of our newest listeners, Chaz, back to one of our founding set of ears, Hagar the Dane, with your reminder of this being the anniversary show, I think we should hear a few words of inspiration from an old buddy called Phil Minot. Now, I phoned Phil to be the official first guest on episode 8. And you might be thinking, 8? How is that the first? Where did you learn your maths? Well, 8 was officially the first, although you can still hear 1 to 7 if you... is it called tab back far enough? Because before it was called Breathe Pictures. It started life as a podcast called Breathe Pictures, which was parked for quite a while. And then, when I started this podcast, we had those first 7 sat there, so we did. And then we just continued from the number 8. And if you're intrigued, you might not be, but just in case you may be, why Phil? Why Phil Minot? It's not necessarily a name that you've heard in the photographic world. He is a jobbing photographer from Cambridge in the UK. And I've known Phil for decades and decades and decades. And when I had I've told this story before, but just in case you missed it, when I had my one of my original radio shows on the BBC on Auntie Beeb, it was at a radio station in Cambridge called BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, and it was a sort of local stroke semi-regional radio station, and I presented the arts show in the afternoon, and one of the suggestions that was made by my researcher, Joe, was that we should have Phil on the show, who was a photographer that she knew from the Cambridge Evening News, and we'd do a spot on photography each week. And I said to Joe, don't be daft. Who is going to listen to a show about photography on a sound medium? There's irony for you. But Joe was very persuasive, and I'm pleased that she was, because Phil became a guest on the show, and he was, I suppose, really the first photographer that I really knew. And Phil would come in, answer questions on the radio about photography, and that's how my friendship with Phil started. And I'm delighted to say that he still works on the radio, not on Radio Cambridgeshire anymore, but on a commercial radio station, doing a very similar thing now, all these years later. So I like to think we helped each other with confidence. He helped me with photography, and I maybe played a small part in his interest with radio. And that was why Phil was on the show for episode 8, which was the official first episode. And we were talking about photography and photographers and how both had really changed since Phil had been a jobbing professional for 4 decades. And he had this to share about making pictures, earning trust and confidence, which is an important subject when you consider what we're talking about today, particularly if you're making portraits of people. And I always think it's good to hear tips from those that have been in the industry a long time, that are this jobbing professional, which I don't think that's a bad phrase at all. I think that's a good thing. Somebody who has plenty of knowledge, plenty of experience, plenty of stories to share. And it's always good to hear my friend Phil talk.
We have that golden 15 seconds people talk about when you first engage with somebody. And you have to find out in that moment, is it somebody you have to massage their ego? And I don't mean that in a you're a lovely person, but it's being respectful. And it's somebody who perhaps wants confidence, and busy people don't like wasting their time. There's nothing worse than any person turning up to do their profession and they and ah and they're not sure. And there's the old photographer professional tip, isn't there? You turn up and you're not sure what the light's doing, what f-stop you want, and what your background is, but you never convey that to the person you're photographing. You might convey it to the PR person or the art director, but you never convey that to the subject. We used to do that thing where you would go through the process of taking the photo, but you knew you weren't going to use it because your brain was moving on to where you were going to move them to. But it's keeping people engaged, and that's the skills we need to focus on more. Because let's be honest about this, we do live in an age where if somebody wants something on social media, if the photographer who turns up can't add anything extra to that occasion, then why wouldn't the chief executive of an organisation ask their PR to take that picture on their smartphone?
The voice of my friend Phil, or Philip. We haven't talked about our wonderful Facebook friends, talking of friends, for a good few weeks, so I wanted to say thank you to those who meet in there, who have conversations, chats, share stories with their pictures. I spied a few really interesting ideas to maybe spark your creativity in there, and I thought I must share them with you. And if you're not a member of the Facebook group, you might just think, oh, I need to be in there. And you can just pop up with the right shoes. We don't let anybody with grubby shoes in. And you can join us in the Facebook group and become a part of those stories. Maybe you'll have your own to share. Casey Sisterson is where we'll start. It was late, but spring has finally arrived in my part of Canada land in Manitoba, says Casey. My photo walks sometimes simply mean checking out the backyard, though, with my macro rig all set up. I love finding the unseen world exposed through macro photography. And the bonus is that I can grab my camera while working from home and photograph the bugs at lunch. And it's a whole new world, isn't it? Honey, I Shrunk the Photographer. Casey, it's a great idea. And I've shared your pictures on the show page today. What a fantastic idea to go on a photo walk within your own backyard, looking for these incredible macro finds. And I know we keep talking about it, but we really do have to do a show on the incredible world of close-up photography. And then some inspirational words from Tim Wallace, who we've spoken to on this show before, and I'll link to his website in the show notes. I think you'll like this. These are some words that he posted in the Facebook group, which I thought was really quite inspirational. Photography, writes Tim, is about emotion, its essence to capture a moment in time. I've been shooting professionally for a long time now, and people ask me constantly what camera I use, what lens I use, what settings I'm on, and so on. But it's not about the equipment, and there comes a time when you also realise that it's not as important to shoot something to show what it simply looks like as it is to show how it makes you feel. You should always shoot from your heart, create from your imagination and your own emotions. There'll always be two people in every photograph, the person who took it and the person who is looking at it. How it makes them feel comes from their own emotions, and how it's shot comes from yours. Photography is not about what camera you use, it's about what you feel inside and your ability to transfer that into a single brief, glimpsing moment that is captured forever. Bravo, Tim. Bravo. If I had two hands free, I'm holding your letters with one and the microphone with the other. If I had them both free, I'll give you a round of applause right now, in the middle of open countryside, with a walker just over there thinking, what is he doing? Suddenly bursting into applause. I think I might just go on this path instead. So we have macro, which has me, well, definitely wanting to reach for my lens and see what really amazing life lives in the pots and the grass and the flowers and the, well, whatever, in my own backyard. And then Tim with a reminder of feelings above kit. And if you'd like to join our Facebook, our private Facebook group, then I'd be delighted to see you in there. Just go to Facebook. There is a Facebook page which promotes really the shows as they get aired. Ably looked after by the most amazing and wonderful Neil Ford. And then we have our group, which is also ably looked after by the amazing Neil Ford and Emily Renier, who pops in there as well to help conversations start. Right, time for part two of my conversation with Gabriele Matola about street work and street photography and that confidence that it takes to make street portraits. Interestingly, in my chat with Gabriele after we'd stopped rolling, she said something that I've noted down. Never stop the tape rolling, Neil. I know. Rule number one. What's the first rule? Never stop the tape rolling, Neil. What's the second rule? Never stop the tape rolling, Neil. What's the third rule? Never. We get the idea. But Gabriele said, if I've had 5 rejections, talking about confidence and asking people for permission to make their portrait. If I've had 5 rejections before lunchtime, I know I'm having a good day. That's what Gabriele said, which made me feel a lot more confident in asking people for portraits and thinking, well, what's the worst that could happen? They could just say no. So here's part 2 of my conversation this week with street photographer and mentor and trainer Gabriele Matola.
I'm interested to know, Gabriele, when you run your workshops, when you mentor those who are wanting to find their street confidence, what you're hearing from those attending, which is a question I think I'd ask anybody who mentors and teaches street portrait shooting. Are they asking for the actual language of what to say when approaching somebody for a street portrait? What are people's main concerns? What are they wanting to, I suppose, conquer?
They basically want to get over their fear of doing it. They really want to do it. They're curious about people, but they have this fear of doing it, and they need help overcoming it. I mean, everybody that comes on the workshop has to do the work. And I can show them the door, but they have to step through it at some point. I send out ahead of the workshop my sort of top 10 principles, which helps me focus on my intent. And I make a point of saying, like, these are not rules. This is just what I tell them. These are my rules. And I encourage them to have a think about, maybe after the workshop, writing their own, because it's really important to clarify intent. Why are you doing this? And what's important to you?
Does teaching improve your own work? You touched on it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the teaching has changed my level of confidence as well. But I mean, I've been teaching for a long time. I have a lot of experience teaching, and always I learn something when I teach, because people invariably ask questions I haven't thought of. And having to verbalize and explain things is a bit like having to write your intentions down. It really makes you think about them and get clear on them. So yeah, absolutely. And I love teaching. I love helping people. I love it's very rewarding to teach and to do it well. I mean, it's really improved actually my confidence doing more considered portraits. So I've started to, which I've been thinking about doing for ages, I've started to photograph people that I really respect and admire and that are really interesting. And I'm taking lights with me, which I've always had a kind of fear of, because once you start putting lights into the equation, I found this. I did 2 portraits on one day, and I lost a little bit on the direction of the person and focusing on my connection, because I've got, my brain's thinking about, well, should that go up or down, or should it point this way or that way? And exposure, and it throws a monkey wrench in it, which is why my colleague Wendy said that I need a lighting assistant, and she's right. And I used to have a fear of that too. How would I relate to somebody? How would I tell them what to do? Would I feel comfortable doing that? Yeah. And all of the teaching has really helped me move through those fears, move beyond them, and be more confident generally.
Gabrielle, you must be really interesting to spend a day with, or an evening with, or just going out socially with, because as a photographer, I would be watching you to think, right, who's she going to photograph next? Because everybody is a street portrait in some respects, aren't they? You must be always looking around thinking, you look great, that's great, I can see this, I'd like to photograph you. You must have a story.
I don't actually focus on the stories. That's not what's happening. I'm not looking for a story. I'm looking at, like, the human face is just amazing and endlessly fascinating. Yeah. It's it's all linked to emotion. It's the main interface by which we communicate and experience emotion. Of course, hands and bodies also do that, but faces. So I'm looking for emotions on the street. I'm looking for feelings.
How did you deal with the masks then? Because that covers a fair proportion of somebody's face and expression.
Well, the masks themselves would have been really interesting to photograph, but the problem was that I was behind my own wretched mask, and I was having trouble getting myself into a headspace to do it. There were too many conflicting ideas about, is it dangerous? I was also living with somebody who was older and at the time and, more vulnerable physically to the disease. So I was thinking about her as well.
In terms, though, of who you do choose when you do make your portraits on the street, who do you choose, I wonder?
I don't have a type. Maybe I do, but I haven't distilled what that is into words. But it's interesting to see who people stop. So sometimes one of the stages we go through in the workshop is, okay, I want you to point out to me who you would photograph if you could do it right now. And it's really interesting to see who people pick up on, because it isn't the same for everyone. I mean, some people are quite obvious. I posted a picture of the zombie punk who's in Camden. I don't tend to go up to Camden to photograph. In fact, I don't think I've ever been up to Camden to do street portraiture because of the fact that it's so obvious.
It's rich with characters, isn't it, really, Camden?
It is. I mean, but then again, so is Walthamstow. Depends on where you're going. But it's a different kind of character. It's somebody who's more externally expressing their character, which is an art in itself. And I guess I tend to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary surface more. And the extraordinary surface, looking for the ordinary in the extraordinary surface, I think is in some ways more challenging. And it comes down to what Edward Weston said about photographs and his peppers, that the photograph must transcend the subject. It's not enough to just take a photograph of an exotic thing, or make a record of something that's exotic. The photograph should bring its own take to it. So it's challenging on a different level.
I love coming round full circle in a conversation. And I feel like I must mention the word rejection again. I wonder if you've gotten over that fear of rejection. It seems to me you probably have. I was crestfallen last week on the Photowalk when I saw this wonderful character. I mean, he looked like a proper sea dog, long grey beard. Because I had a clipboard, he thought that I had turned up as some sort of lockkeeper and was not very happy about the way he was going through the lot with his canal boat. And I asked him for a portrait, and he said he rejected me, and I was crestfallen for that moment. And I thought, I'm not going to ask anybody else now because I've just lost it. You've gotten past that stage, surely.
I mean, it's interesting that you said, how did you put it? You said, gotten over my fear of rejection.
Yeah.
No, never. It's human. I haven't gotten over my fear of rejection. I face it almost every time I make a picture and every time I get a no. Yeah. What it is I've learned how to handle that in a way that doesn't stop me the next time. To answer your question, yes and no. No, I haven't gotten over my fear of rejection. What I've done is I've changed my relationship to it. So if somebody rejects me, I get past it a lot quicker, and I get back on the horse. I move on to the next one, sometimes as quickly as possible. And it stings, it does. It stings a little bit, but I don't have to hold on to that sting. Yeah. And I also have learned that it's never about me. I don't have to internalize that rejection. It's about the other person. It's what they're going through. It's their, they probably, they may say no to everybody. It's not about you. And that's really helpful, I think. And like, not just in photography, but life.
I thought his choice of words when he rejected me were quite interesting. He said, "No, I don't think you should." And I thought, what a strange reaction to that question. Can I make your portrait?
Did you ask him why?
No. At that point, I felt, okay. I did wonder, though. I did start my fanciful mind, as I called it, I think on the program, started wondering, I wonder what he's done that's probably so wrong that I shouldn't be making his portrait. I invented a whole narrative around him within the first 5 steps of walking away from him.
There you go. There's that mind again.
Yeah.
You may never, the thing is the goal isn't to get a picture, regardless of anything. The goal is for me is to make a connection. So I would be genuinely interested in why, and I would engage him in conversation, not as a way to manipulate him into making a picture, but because I'm genuinely curious. Yeah. It might have the surprising side effect of him changing his mind, which has happened to me. People have said no. Sometimes it's a hard no. And when it's a hard no, I respect and I say thank you. And people are genuinely often surprised that I'm not behaving negatively towards them when they say no. And they're very surprised and happy. I can tell they're happy, pleasantly surprised that I'm kind to them anyway. So I would, but your mind a part of you wanted to ask him. So I have conversations with people. There was a woman who I approached and asked if I could make a picture of her. And she said, why? And I told her, I said, I changed the way I say this sometimes, not consciously, but sometimes I stutter, I stumble over it still. But I said, I really love photographing people. I'm a photographer, and, I just wondered if I could make a picture of you. And she said, well, no, I'm having a bad day. And I just said, I'm sorry to hear that. And I said, I hope it gets better. And she didn't change her mind, but she said, thank you. She really appreciated that. And I walked off. And I was writing about this the other day. It's I think it's a significant thing to do in the world when we live in a world where we have kind of been trained into thinking that everybody is potentially mean or unkind. And so we don't speak to each other, especially in big cities like London. London's known for being, quote unquote, unfriendly compared to, like, say, up north, because everybody is on the defense, because we are protecting ourselves from the imaginary, from the imagined, I should say, because, of course, it's rooted in some reality, but again, it's distorted. And so the act of a stranger just being kind to you, I think, ripples through society just as much as the act of a stranger doing something negative to you. Letting somebody in a traffic situation. Hopefully they'll pass that on. Cutting somebody off in a traffic situation, unless the person's really aware and good at processing that, will likely pass it on.
Well, it's the open window effect that I read about, which I've been trying. Sorry, we're sort of going slightly off tangent here, but maybe it'll help you next time you're coming out in traffic. I know you don't have to worry so much about it because you're on a motorbike most of the time, I think, aren't you? But in a car, the open window philosophy is that if, when you want to pull out, you wind down your window and look out the window, you've removed a barrier and you're more likely to be let out. I've been trying this out and it works.
Yeah. So does removing the barriers that you put on yourself when you go to photograph somebody. It is an open window effect. You're removing your barrier. You're being vulnerable. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how people react to that. I'm pleasantly surprised. 99% of people are kind and receiving, even if they say no. They're not unpleasant. You get the rare occasional one. And it's really a shame the way the world is stacked like that. It's it's a negativity bias, but it's also an evolutionary adaptation that the human has survived with. And it's very similar to what we were talking about earlier with men. One bad apple spoils it for a whole lot of us. I think putting that, opening the windows is what we need. I really believe in our societies, so that we can start to not only appreciate each other more, but start to feel more supported and connected, and also for mental well-being. We know that we're social creatures. we don't do well in isolation. In fact, exile was a tribal consequence of bad behavior, and it was like the worst. It was worse than death.
And of course, that's a thing that most affected people during the lockdown, I think, wasn't it, mentally?
Yeah, being isolated, being cut off from your support systems, being cut off from people.
I'm looking out for that man, that sea dog now, on all my future walks along that stretch of the waterway. Perhaps I'll meet him, and I will ask him again. Will you ask that woman again?
Yeah, she might not be having a bad day if I see her. I mean, again, I wouldn't go seeking her out particularly in this case, in my case, but she might genuinely pique my curiosity again.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to focus on who I'm genuinely curious about. It's not about the hunt. And I think a lot of street photographers, we face this, where we go out to photograph and we're looking for pictures, instead of allowing ourselves to walk into pictures and recognizing them. And Dorothea Lange, she talks about this, and she talks about a point of departure, that it's great to bring your camera with you and go do an errand, like go to the pharmacy or something. And if you happen upon a picture, great. But if you go out hunting for photographs, looking for them, seeking for them expressly, or faces in my case, you don't allow the space for it to happen. You're kind of narrowing your focus window. So I try to get really aware of that ping that I feel inside myself when I see somebody I want to photograph, and that level, that there's a meter inside me. Some people are medium, and some people, like, the meter goes off the scale. And I try to help people to become more conscious of this. I think that's one of the parts of us as street photographers that we work on developing, is our awareness of our own internal curiosity and desire to make a picture. How much do we really want to do that? Make that picture.
And my sincere thanks to Gabrielle Matola for her time this week in talking to her. And I'm really, really looking forward to the workshop that I'm attending on June the 12th. As a proper, I might add, as a proper paid up mentor, workshopee, not mentoree, workshopee. Is that the correct phrase? Workshop attendee. That's probably better. And I will hopefully record a couple of bits that demonstrate how I'm getting along on that particular day. If, Gabrielle, that's okay with you. Is that all right with you? She's looking at me in that, could be, maybe not way. I'll try for you. I will. For links to Gabrielle and other photographers that you've heard from or about today, including Phil Minot and Gulnara Samoilova, Instagrams and websites that we've mentioned, go to today's show page on photographydaily.show, or follow the link in the podcast player app that can also take you there. And I'm going to ask you, I think I asked you last week for a favour, or maybe was it the week before? The weeks go so quickly. If you can help spread the word about the show. That doesn't mean spamming with invites from Facebook, he says, looking over his glasses at you. Though I know, you meant well, my other listener. Just the odd nudge here and there. But that should suffice. For sure, invite some of your friends in Facebook, if it's relevant, if they're photographers, or if they're interested in just making pictures. But not every plumber under the sun, if you get my drift. But if everybody could do the odd nudge, everyone listening today, that would really help our community get strong together with our picture and storytelling. And it would help introduce me and you and our other listener to more and more photographers, professionals, amateurs, hobbyists, whatever, that can share their experiences, things that they've seen, things that they've done, maybe ideas that could spur us on a bit during those moments when we think, I don't know what to shoot today, I'm not sure what to do. What could it be, macro? Should I just take a wander on the street, maybe go for some landscape shooting, get busy with some trees, that sort of thing. Right, play out song. Today it's going to come from Harry Keyworth, and it's called For Another, which is, I think, quite a haunting song in many ways. Well, stylistically, if not emotionally, and it plays very well toward next week's guest, We do have our inspirational guests too, of course, and I'll tell you about him in just a moment's time. This week's postscript to the show is a thought from one Edward Steichen, who was an American photographer, though he was born in Luxembourg, so he's officially Luxembourgish, isn't he? Who made these extraordinary portraits of people, though there is a film at the foot of the show notes page today on the website that shows just how important he was to photography as a complete medium. It's a film by the amazing Photographic Eye channel, which is produced by Alex Kilby, who I've watched this channel grow. And if you want to subscribe to a channel that's about the history of photography, then this is a great place to start. Alex Kilby with a Photographic Eye, and he's going to be on this show soon as a guest. He's a mind of information, and his YouTube channel is nudging the 100,000 subscriber channel level now, or subscriber channel 100,000 subscriber level now. I'll get that right. Which for a history of art and photography channel is worth writing home about, definitely. Anyway, Steichen says the culmination of his life's work came in the 1950s when he curated, and you may have heard of this, the Family of Man exhibition, which featured 503 photographs from 68 countries. More than, get this, 9 million people saw that exhibition. And quote from Wiki on the event, which I've linked to in the show notes as well so that you can read some more about it. The physical installation and the layout of the Family of Man exhibition were designed to enable the visitor to view it as if it were a photo essay about human development and the cycles of life that affirmed a common human identity and destiny against the contemporary Cold War threats of nuclear war. Boy, chillingly. In need of another such exhibition, some might say. Anyway, there's some history of Edward Steichen, and I wonder too whether his words inspired the thoughts of Tim Wallace earlier on when he talked about the two people concept of a photograph. The person making the photograph and the person in the photograph, this sort of dalliance or dance. So here's today's postscript by Edward Steichen. A portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it. I'll leave that thought percolating with you while we have our play-out song, that tune to meander together with and make a final few pictures too.
So much left out here, brings to the edge. I hope this world again for each other. Take the tension to the bed and take me in. I hope these feelings again on each other.
Gary Keyworth for another. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Gabrielle Matola, Gulnara Samoilova and Phil Meinert, plus mpb.com, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, thank you, and tomorrow is the More Show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support, and we're going to be chasing the voice on the tube. I'm talking about the ultimate portfolio reviews, prepping yourself for honest feedback about your pictures. Next Friday, I'm talking to commercial photographer, editorial photographer and documentary storyteller Gareth Ewan Jones about his caravan and, you'll love this, Morris dancing project. You know how I feel about those people, wonderful people, plus lighting stuff from above in an amazing project where Gareth went out after dark in the very first lockdown with the most extraordinary idea for lighting pictures of trees.
So I played around with smaller prosumer drones like Mavic Pros, but I had the drone for ages and I just sort of thought, well, I'm going to attach a flashlight, a small 100-watt flashlight to it. It might burn out the motors, it might be the end of the Mavic, but I'll just see what it does. So I actually superglued a flashlight. It was the first time I did it. I superglued a flashlight to the bottom of a Mavic Pro, if you can imagine such a thing. I've got photos of it.
But what did happen to his drones and pictures? Find out next week. Monday, we have another assignment from our film man, though digital cameras, most welcome, with Jim Solos. Music today is from the wonderful artslist.io, and if you're a filmmaker or photographer who makes slideshows, it's a fabulous resource, and you'll find a link on our website to that. There are lots of VIPs, of course, very important photographers who help out with this project by the ideas and letters that you send in. Thank you, and please keep sending them in during the week. And I want to mention 3 more who give particular production support. Neil Ford for understanding the tech that he knows I don't, Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin for making sure Instagram is engaging. Oh, and Barney did get his walk, only a little bit later on. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
That looks like Tadpole collection.
Release. Yeah.
Release? Well, we weren't very lucky in our house. We collected, never released. Have yours grown at all?
We got loads in there. We've got like 6 or 7
little tiny frogs, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, so I did them with my class.
Ah,
so
right.
they got to watch them change, and then now they're being set free.
Yeah, born free.
Hopefully they'll be all right in here.
I think this one must have eaten all ours.
Yeah.
See you later. Come on, Barnes, this way. Come on. Good boy. Not in the water. No. Oh, Barney. I said not in the water. Not in the water. 2 very different commands. Just, oh, it's going to be soaking wet. Oh, come on, you. That wasn't part of our arrangement. Come and say hello to everybody. Oh, no, that's my microphone.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.